I'm not going to read the very long list of people who have helped put this together today, but you can find the conference planning committee members on the back sheet of your agenda. If you're a member of the planning committee, would you please wave your hand or stand, whichever you feel comfortable with? Woohoo! Thank you for all your help. And I can see a few staff people stand up and wave if you're a staff person. A lot of them are out and about working. There they are. And we also have a number of board members who are incredibly supportive of this conference and jump in wherever we ask them to. If you're a member of our board of directors, would you please raise your hand or stand? Thanks, folks. Okay. All right, let's get down to it. Every year, the Together We Can conference highlights some shining star advocates. This year, please welcome a mom and son team, who will spend a few minutes telling you more about their journey and introduce our keynote speaker. Please help me welcome Lisa and Alex Arechavaleta.
I'm going to hope it's on. Okay. Well, good morning and welcome to the 2022 Together We Can conference. I'm going to go off script here for just a second. The thing that I too sat exactly where all of you are now sitting and spent many a years at this conference. So it's my favorite conference. It's one of the ones that I feel like I learned the most at as a parent. So I'm excited to be here as the kind of lead-off speaker this year. So anyway, let's get going. My name is Lisa Archivaleta.
I'm Alex Arechavaleta.
And we're going to give you a little glimpse into our development of advocacy and self-advocacy. Alex was diagnosed at 2, and of course, I was just like every other parent, lost, scared. You know, I didn't know where to go, where to turn, and I was completely unprepared for this journey. So the first thing I did was what I did every time I needed to learn about something, and well, this is really kind of at the beginning of the internet, so I guess you just grabbed books back then. Trisha's laughing, she knows what I'm talking about. And so started to learn. But I learned from those around me. I learned from conferences. I learned from those early teachers. And one of my very first lessons was Alex. Go for it. So, kind of like seems like a simple thing. We've all seen it, right? All right. I wanted to get Alex's coat on after school one day. And a teacher said to me, "No, Alex, put your coat on." One of the most basic things that I think a parent can learn is to let them learn. Let them do, okay? As much as they have the capability of doing, but give them those opportunities. Be intentional. Because the thing is that's how they're building their confidence to do the next thing, all right? So that was, and so you can, I'll thank Alex for being my guinea pig in this. But it's such a powerful lesson that we have to learn because sometimes we just want to do it for them and we want to get it done quickly and we don't want to see them struggle. I get that, okay? All right, so we're moving on. School age. The things I can tell you about school age is, you know, be a contributing member. Your voice counts. It has to be heard. Your team needs to hear about your child. Your team needs to hear about your family's needs, right? Read and bring ideas. Even if you're not sure if it's a good idea, bring it and talk about it, right? Meet with your teachers beyond the IEP. Don't just do it once a year. I see a lot of heads shaking. Drop off and pick up. Talk to them. Find out what's going on. Just be there. Listen to their concerns. And it may not even be about your child. It may be about something that they're just struggling with, all right? Bring help, all right? Bring articles, bring information, share with that team. Meet with your teachers, you know, like I said, beyond the IEP, and basically, if they're hearing something where something's not working, advocate for them too, to get them training, to get them what they need to support your child. And you know what? While you're there supporting your child, you're supporting every other child in that room. So bring it on, help them win the battles that they need to win. And cookies. When you're having late IEP, bring food. Okay? They haven't eaten since lunch. It makes everybody less grumpy and more willing to help. Next step. So you're raising a self-advocate, all right? So I advocated for my son early on, and I always advocated for one thing. Every teacher was trained to deal with Alex specifically, okay? So every teacher went to autism training. When we got to junior high, well, it's a little hard. How do you do 10 teachers? How does the school district afford to send 10 teachers, all right? So we developed our own training and did all staff training for a few years so that people understood working with Alex. But guess what? They also understood dealing with other kids like Alex, all right? So it became a better environment for everybody. But then we got to high school. It always gets harder, okay? It always gets harder. And by the time we got to high school, Alex had to start doing that training, all right? So Alex took on the initiative, and he would do the staff trainings for his teachers. And he would answer the questions. So Alex, why don't you tell the group about autism and what you think, if you were talking to teachers, what do you think would have helped you?
Test 1, 2, 3. Okay, so one of the things that I had to do when I was when I had to tell the teachers how to take care of someone on the spectrum in their classroom, it would be involved with giving them attention that they would need, such as tough love. You give them the support they need, but then they have to figure it out on their own. Like, for instance, being able to learn how to accommodate for themselves in the classroom. Also, they need to learn how to manage anxiety. Teachers need to learn how to do that and help the student on the spectrum be able to manage their own anxiety. And then another thing that they had to do was, let's say they get distracted, or like there's a huge amount of distraction. Maybe some fidget devices would be okay in the classroom, and it maybe even would lessen anxiety or stress, and it would also be able to let them focus a little more after they get a little time in with it. So give them a little time with it, and then let them hop right back in.
Great, Alex. So a lot of times when you had to talk to teachers about things that you would help you, then it also helped other students. But it was a lot of time, help us focus, help us manage our anxiety, and help us manage those issues of fidgeting and needing. For Alex, it was pacing. So how do you pace? Okay, so.
And sensory issues as well.
So Alex had to begin his journey of self-advocacy by the time he was in high school. All right, well, guess what? That's not enough. We're going to go on to college. All right, your IEP doesn't count anymore, folks. So how are you going to manage going to college? So Alex, can you talk about getting accommodations?
In college, I would receive a SARS plan. In college, I would receive a SARS plan, which I would have to deliver to each one of my professors. And this plan would allow me to give extended test time during tests. The teachers would have to required to give me notes after class. And during extended test time, I would then go ask the teacher before the test, maybe like a few days in advance or a day or two, if I could take my test a little early, which is on my accommodations, my STARS accommodations, not IEP. And I would be given that time. And one of the things I would do is they would send me off to a classroom where the special needs or disability services was, and she would give me like 30 minutes extra of test time. This was very helpful during my art history classes.
So who was responsible for that SARS? The teacher or you?
Me.
Okay. So now, we graduated from college. All right, folks, time to get a job. So Alex, give me a little bit of background about conquering the interview process, and also about so answer a question: why should you get a job?
Conquering the interview process came with trial and error. There were a lot of jobs out there that I wanted after college, but it was a lot harder than it looked because a lot of the skills I had, I just couldn't get them out during the interview correctly, and sometimes I would fumble, I would stumble, I would mess up, and I felt really impacted by it. But it also did make me stronger. I began to then expect what they were going to ask during the interview process a lot more frequently. And I was able to practice a lot more on my own, and I was able to then master interview skills a lot more quickly.
So why should they give you the job?
And why should they give me the job? Well, I am very creative, I have attention to detail, I am very loyal, I'm on time to work.
All good reasons to hire him, right? All right. So, finally and beyond, one of Alex's lifelong hobbies has been drawing and design, okay? And his degree is in graphic design. And Alex is trying to publish a graphic novel. So, recently, we went to a Comic-Con in Kansas City that's known to have a lot of artists, literary agents, a lot of the people Alex needs to talk to, okay? So Alex, what I'd like you to do is maybe give just a piece of your elevator speech that you provided to the literary agents and the artists that you were working with.
Certainly. My comic is called ASD, Angels, Souls, and Demons. It is an autism-themed comic. Being an atypical teenager isn't always easy, especially if you're Thane Stonegrave. Sure, certainly Thane has anxiety. He has hypnotherapy for his anxiety attacks, and his best friend recently died in a car accident. But he's generally a good kid. But Thane begins to see a world that very few can see, a world where where dealings with the dead exist, a world where the criminal underworld is entwined with the literal demonic underworld, and the only beings keeping the spirit world and the living world safe and sound are the Grim Reapers. Soon Thane is thrust into the role of a Grim Reaper, and he must absolve his now semi-resurrected friend of a crime that he may or may not have committed in the spirit world that might impact the world of the living. Up against ghosts of crypts and shadows, demon lords of hell, and the wild hunt, Thane will learn, dead or alive, don't back down.
If you're interested, later on at a break, just stop by. We brought a copy. Got a few. Anyway, we'd like to just thank you. And one more thing. We're going to run out of time here.
And if anyone has any connections into the literary agency or the graphic novel world, please feel free to let her know.
Always going to sell. Well, now, just like to thank you, listening to our story, where we've been, where we're going. All right, it's very emotional for me. So sorry to tear up. The sign of a mother. Yes. Anyway, but we're here today And I spent some time getting to know Lola last night, and I think you're all going to be so impressed. She works as a global financial works for a global financial institution where she advises business partners on issues connected to the Americans with Disability Act as it relates to the procurement and implementation of customer-facing technology. In 2020, Lola launched the Not Your Mama's Autism podcast. Part audio memoir, part interview-style podcast, Lola weaves in personal narratives of her life as an older sibling to an autistic man with an intellectual disability, and now as a mother of 2 autistic children, with interviews of various members of the global neurodivergent and disabled communities. In 2021, she gave a TED Talk titled, "Your Path is Your Purpose," where she explained how seemingly disjointed events led her to the life purpose she lives today. Last year, Lola also launched her column on psychcentral.com titled The Caregivers Chronicles, where she uses the written word to speak on life lessons learned as a lifetime caregiver. She's also on the board of 2 nonprofits dedicated to bettering healthcare, support, and employment opportunities for people with disabilities. Lola,
Lola has a bachelor's degree in computer information systems from Eastern Illinois University, a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University, and a law degree from Howard University. She currently lives in Dallas, Texas metro area with her husband, 2 children, and a Portuguese water dog.
Lola Dada-Olley is an attorney, an advocate, a writer, a podcast host, a speaker, and just an outright wonderful person. So I would like to welcome Lola to the stage to enlighten us all.
See? It's okay. We'll get through this. We're gonna make it happen, people. I'm just glad I haven't fallen yet in my heels. So it's been 2 years. I was telling some of the audience members earlier. So I'm a silver lining person. So you'll learn that. We'll make it happen. Testing, testing, testing. Are we on? Okay. Let's make it happen, people. Gonna make it happen. I like to make eventful entrances. That's how I do it. First and foremost, thank you. Thank you to the Ask Resource Center. Thank you for all the organizers for this event. This is my first in-person conference in 3 years. I've been doing the virtual circuit for a while, so I am very, very happy to be here. This is very meaningful to me, so thank you all. I want to talk to you all today about bringing your whole self to life. And as my bio gives away, I'm a multi-hyphenate. Much like most of you, I'm more than just one thing. I'm more than just one category. And perhaps occasionally, I want the entire world around me to know that I'm more than just one thing or one category. So that may mean I'm more than just a self-advocate. In the applicable case, I'm more than just an advocate. I'm more than just a parent, a sibling, a caregiver, a lifetime caregiver. But sometimes due to life circumstances, we get stuck in a rut. And sometimes that's just due to survival purposes. We get stuck in this rut, and sometimes we stay in that one category for so long that we can feel disconnected to the other parts of us. I more than understand. I've been there. But it actually took a global pandemic, some time for some self-reflection, if you will, to fully see the importance of being better at reconnecting to more of me so that I'm able to bring my whole self to life. And I know my personal story may have some unique elements to it, but I sincerely hope that you all can take some nuggets from my story and apply it to your own life for those of you who genuinely feel disconnected. You won't be alone after what we've all just gone through. The more I consistently showed up, the more I was able to not only better care for my family, but myself. Full disclosure, because we're among friends here, I started to truly dream big again in a way I hadn't done in a very, very long time. Within the last 2 years, as my bio gives away, I've been a little busy. I launched a podcast. I gave a TEDx talk. I now consistently speak on neurodiversity, disability, and race, sometimes the mix of the two. #coming attractions. And I joined the board of these 2 nonprofits. My life is far from easy right now, but it has a meaning that I have yet to fully put into words. I even started a brand new position within the area of law that we spoke about in my bio. I literally just started that in January. I've started to say yes a lot more and keep moving forward in a way that is beyond meaningful. Maybe one day I'll be able to fully encapsulate how I feel about that. But if you told me that at the start of this pandemic that all of these things would have happened, I would have not only believed you, I'd be like, I'm just trying to get 5 hours of sleep. But my ability to connect and reconnect to these various parts of me truly became the foundation to the woman that stands before you today that can nearly trip up the stairs and I still keep it moving. Now, getting off of autopilot and connecting and reconnecting to these various parts, as I've said, definitely looks different for everyone. And I want people to be able to just see these nuggets. I know that our life circumstances are not exactly the same. Perhaps it's the lawyer in me, but I want to give that disclaimer as I start my story. So, with that in mind, we're talking about some level setting. I mentioned there are 3 parts. There's recognizing the lane that you're in, and sometimes when you're in autopilot, it's hard to recognize. There's redefining success. Once you recognize your lane, how does that look for your family? How does that look like for you? And there's reimagining what it means to thrive. So we're starting off with recognizing your own lane. So how did I recognize and eventually own my own lane? I did it by re-examining my origin story through what I call radical introspection to better understand who I am and how I got here. So, it's an occupational hazard. I'm an attorney. I apologize. I will have some definitions in here. I like to level set. It's what I do. You've all been warned. I know there's some lawyers in the group. That's kind of what we do. Sorry. So, I'm an attorney by trade. I like to look at definitions, apply it to my own life. The word recognize. One definition is to acknowledge formally. So to acknowledge formally. So let's keep that in mind. Mama and Papa Dada, coming to America. I was born to Nigerian immigrants who were in the pursuit of a great education when they met each other. They would eventually get degrees, settle down in the Midwest, with their 3 children. Their view of the American dream is to get a great education, to not only feed themselves, to not only feed their families, but to feed our extended family back home. The pressures associated with that, with those of us that may have been here for generations, are not always fully realized, but the pressure, almost the survivor's remorse of making sure that you not only come here to be successful, but you stay successful and your kids are successful, is a lot. My mom became a registered nurse, my dad became a pharmacist, check, check. The American dream also meant bringing children into this world who would get straight A's, never get into trouble, always be polite, especially to their elders. So, no pressure. Now, as Nigerian American kids, you were taught that anytime you messed up, I'm sure some people can relate to this, because this, I think, is a universality. When you mess up, it's not only on you, it's on the family. So if you mess up, that Dada kid. In my case, though, being first-generation American family, it was also reflected on our Nigerian American community. So the pressure of living up to these ideals on both a family level and community level was huge. Are we at the, see, I also forgot my glasses, so that also helps. Okay, yep. So the continued pursuit of the American dream included my parents building their own home in the suburbs right outside of Chicago. So to our knowledge, so the pressure of first generation American, I moved out to the burbs at 5, so that's one of my earliest memories of don't mess up, so that tells you how embedded this was. And moving to the burbs, to our knowledge, we were the first Black family to move in. So my parents moved us there for the schools, which at the time, they were great schools, great sports program. My parents were building a life for themselves in a country that was not originally their own, and rearing, at the time, 2 young children, the best way they knew how. Soon my baby brother would join the clan. He was developing normally, whatever that means, until about 18 months old. He was speaking in full sentences. I remember him saying, "I want fufu." Fufu is a West African dish. It's a starch you dip into stew. It's quite tasty, just throwing that out there. And he would constantly say, I want fufu, I want fufu. Then suddenly, he stopped talking as much, and then eventually one day we would never hear his voice again. He's now in his 30s. He's never spoken to us again in the way he did at 18 months old. Now, this is before autism awareness, inclusion, the puzzle pieces, the infinity symbol, what one of my podcast guests referred to as autism on autism crime, like all this yelling and fighting inward, and we must all be advocates, and I understand all that now, but let's go back decades. There was nothing. People didn't even know what the word autism was. Doctors didn't help. My family felt very much alone. A doctor once told my dad that either you have a genius on your hands or you have a problem. Not particularly helpful. He was 3, I was 9. Kunle at age 3, his full name, Ayo Kunle, means joy has filled the home. What I was watching, and I didn't have the words for then, was that my parents were experiencing an American dream that was not matching their expectations. And at age 9 would be when my advocacy journey would begin. So the effect I could see on my parents. I was too young to fully have the words, but now that I'm older, I so much better understand, especially now that I'm a parent in a similar situation. There was the feeling of being lost. There was a denial at the time, because in our community, both in our town and then in the Nigerian American community, we didn't see anybody that looked like us. I watched that initial denial. I watched my mom beat herself up, racking her brain, wondering what possibly could have happened. Why did Kunle turn out different than Wale, my other brother, and me? What did she do wrong? There weren't peer groups, there weren't parent groups. She was very much alone. I watched my mom openly compare other children to Kunle. I would watch her under her breath say, so-and-so is the same age as Kunle. And I processed that internally to mean that child is developing cognitively in a conventional way, mine is not. I watched her do it when he was a little boy, and then when he was a teenager, and even as a young man. It was a time when the R word was freely used to describe anyone whose brain was wired differently. I would frequently attend my baby brother's IEP meetings. I researched what I could. I was a little girl. I would go to the public library. I was like, find me something on autism. And I researched other neurological conditions. I even went to the University of Chicago hospitals with my parents and talked to a neurologist. Now that I'm older, this poor man looked at me like, what is this little girl doing? And I said, well, I think my brother may have Landau-Kleffner syndrome. And he's like, no, it's autism, girl. The young kids would say now that I was doing the most. I was doing the most. The diagnosis changed the family makeup. I became like a third parent. As the oldest child in a situation for us at the time that was unprecedented, remember this was before social media, now if you get a diagnosis, you can see that other people are like you. But my little child brain naturally put immense pressure on itself. Remember, there weren't any sibling peer groups either. I desperately wanted there to be order in my world. I wanted to provide comfort to my parents. I wanted to provide comfort to my brothers. I put all that on me. So growing up in that home and coming from where my family originally came from, I sat at a crossroads. I sat at the intersection of race, gender, immigration, disability, and neurodivergence. Intersectionality is a term first coined by civil rights advocate Kimberly Crenshaw and refers to the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, ableism, sexism, racism, combine, overlap, and intersect, especially in the experience of marginalized people. Intersectionality showed up in many ways, in my life then and in my life now. Because, like I mentioned earlier, I'm more than one thing. I'm more than one category. And so are all of you. I'm going to first talk to you about a couple of examples before I play audio, so you better understand the context upon which I grew up. So again, imagine this almost model community. Great schools, great sports program. I would grow up to get a D1 basketball scholarship, which is why I still don't know how to wear heels that well. And my brother grew up to get a D1 football scholarship. I was also on the honor roll. I was that kid always striving for being the perfectionist. But I would get subtle reminders in my community, even though I had been living there since I was 5, that I didn't quite belong. An example, I was 17 years old. My parents just bought me my first car, Toyota Corolla. Hashtag Toyota Corollas are great first cars. And I was sitting in the car outside of my parents' home. The police drove by. I was sitting down in the car, came outside the door, had me open it, and asked me what I was doing there. I explained this was my home. He didn't believe me. He had me take out my driver's license. It was only when he realized that the number on the license matched the number on the house, and he let me go. There was another point about a year later where I was in a McDonald's parking lot and nearly the identical thing happened. Give me your license so you could prove that you're supposed to be here. The reason why I bring that up is so that you can understand the context upon which this audio is about to be played. I grew up somewhat, went away to college, but my brother still remained in the same town. So, intersection, race, autism, and disability. My baby brother Kunle loves being driven around, loves it, which is ironic because my daughter now does too, so we say it's genetic, like they love to be driven around, they were meant to have a posh life. So we drive him around the neighborhood, all of us had done it. My parents still do it today, I do it whenever I come home, my brother did it. But my middle brother, Wale, was a fairly new driver, so he's like, okay, Kunle, let's go on a drive. He went on a drive in our very subdivision, and they would be stopped by the police, and it would not be an ordinary stop. Please play the audio.
Okay, so basically, yeah, I just got my license maybe like a year or two, still a relatively new driver. Just driving around. At that time, Kunle had liked to, just like right now, he likes to just go out and, and drive around and just see different routes and just see just the scenery and listen to music and dance and whatever have you. So we were just driving around on one of those typical, I believe it was like a late afternoon. We were driving around and, and like I said, I just got my license, so everything was by the book. As far as stopping at stop signs, making sure you're behind the white line or whatever. So everything's by the book, and I made a turn, I believe. And I was just driving down the street, and it was still off in one of the subdivisions. And all of a sudden the police come, and we were jamming, we had the music on, Kunle was dancing, and we were just having a good time. And the music came, the police came and stopped us. And, they asked you for the typical license and registration and whatnot. And I don't even think I even asked them why am I being stopped or whatever. It wasn't even a question that I didn't even think, because at that point I was just like, the police are here. Kunle, just calm down. We'll be okay. I gave them all the proper identification. And all of a sudden they were asking me to come out of the car, right? And I'm coming out of the car, and this is just right around the time where Kunle had, finally put on his own seatbelt. We didn't have to do it for him. He put on his own seatbelt, and he wouldn't open the door to the car or anything. He would just kind of just sit there, grab the handle, and just dance and just do his own thing. So he sees me get out of the car, and he's still relatively calm at that point. And all of a sudden, then I was told to put my hands on the hood of the car, and I'm on the hood of the car. And these guys, I believe there were 2 officers. There might have been more that came after that. But I know at that present moment there were 2 officers. So I was right in the front of the car, on the hood of the car, and Kunle was just kind of just watching me. And then I don't know if it's as we know now, it's more of a comfort thing, or maybe it could be either a comfort thing or a sense of nervousness, in which he starts to rock forward and back. So I mean, there's two different rocks. Like there's like the forward and back rock in which he's dancing, and then there's that forward and rock back in which he's just in turbo mode. You know what I mean? That's how he's really either agitated or really nervous, or he just doesn't understand what's going on. And I think that's like his thing of comfort or whatever it may be. And he went from the slow rock, and I could just see him because I was on the hood, to like the turbo rock. He was moving just boom, 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 forward and back. And at that point, that's when the officers called in. I'm like, "Yo, what's up with the guy in the passenger seat?" And I kept telling them that he can't talk. And it wasn't the way I always described Kunle. I didn't like, it wasn't like the how it is now as far as like, there's he's on the spectrum. He's autistic or whatever it is. It was at that point, it was like, oh, your brother's a retard. And that word to me, I always hated that word. You know what I mean? So my description was, I guess I could have been more descriptive, but my description was, he can't talk. He can't talk. I just remember feeling at that point like, man, like, do not do anything to my brother. You know what I mean? Don't do anything. Do whatever you want to me. Mind you, we didn't do anything wrong. I still don't even know why we're even in this position. And it was like, just don't do anything to my brother because he's innocent. You know what I mean? Like, he had no idea what was going on. And I remember them screaming something like along the line. A lot of this is like kind of like, I don't know if I like blocked it from my memory or it was just like one of those times in your life where you're just like, like an out of body experience type thing. But I just remember them going over to the passenger side and saying, "Get out of the car, get out of the car." And they're literally screaming at this kid. And I'm just thinking like, he may or may not understand what they're saying, but in his mind, he's looking at his older brother on the hood of the car, and he's looking like, man, my whole world, this is obviously autistic people are on the spectrum. They like everything in a routine, everything the same. So when something comes that's different than it's out of their norm, it throws them completely off. So now that I know more about that, I can only imagine the things that were going on in his mind and his body. They're like, "Get out of the car, get out of the car." And I just kept screaming, "He can't talk, he can't talk, leave him alone, leave him alone." And I don't know what came over them or what transpired exactly after that particular point, what exactly transpired, because it was almost like as quickly as it all happened, as quickly as we got pulled over, I'm out of the car, I'm on the hood, Kunle's rocking back and forth, all of a sudden it was like, okay, you guys are good, here's your license and registration, have a good evening.
That was an excerpt from a podcast episode where my brother and I discussed what happened that day. It was in the midst of the pandemic, it was in the midst of George Floyd, when we realized that we had never told our parents the story. The reason why we never told our parents the story is due to intersectionality again. My parents are immigrants. They did not experience any form of racism till they got to the United States. We, in our young minds, because we grew up in it, were looking at our parents like, would they even understand? Not that they didn't experience it, they experienced it as adults. So it's different than when you're still forming who you are in the world. Things like this happen to you. But what it did tell me, it became a contributing factor as to why you see this attorney before you today. Because I figured that while most of my family was pursuing something in healthcare, one of us had to go to law school in order to navigate this legal framework, because I was already beginning to see that my baby brother, being a member of all of these protected classes, just needed someone in the family to better understand it, even if I never practiced law a day in my life. I'll lighten it up a bit, y'all. So Oh, I just moved. I moved to Texas 7 years ago. Now I'm saying y'all. I'm originally from the Chicago area. See, it just came out. It just came out. So, growing up the way I did, if I started seriously dating anyone, I thought of Kunle because we're a package deal, right? We're a package deal. Like, oh, you like me? Great. Brothers right here. So, I met a guy. The guy became fiance guy, became husband guy. But before then, after we got engaged, but before we got married, I made sure he came home to see my baby brother in the fullness of who Kunle is, because I already knew that lifetime caregiving was on the horizon. And I'm happy to announce that he passed the Kunle test. Kunle's life obviously is intertwined with mine. I understand between me and Wale, my middle brother, that we have lifetime caregiving responsibilities. And I made it known to my husband, as I've already mentioned. And I know the day is coming. My parents are getting older now, where they're going to pass that baton. There's a saying called "nothing you've been through is wasted." I'm a living testimony to that, because all this research I did, all this thinking I was some part-time neurologist, all these things I was doing, I thought it was only to be prepping for my brother, but it was actually preparing me for multi-generational advocacy, even complete with making sure my husband was on board. It would become the foundation to how we raise our children. So, because at least I believe nothing you've been through is wasted, I would grow up to have not just one baby on the spectrum, but two, diagnosed less than a year apart, this time a boy and a girl. So God wanted to throw in, the girl part. And they represent different forms of autism manifestation. So to give you some background, my son is now highly verbal. Like highly. Like he could come up here and do this speech. He's tested into our schools, 2 different school districts, gifted and talented program at age 4.5, 5. He's highly cerebral, but highly empathetic. He desperately wants to know the dynamics behind conversation, and I think part of it is because he sometimes misses social cues, so he genuinely wants to learn. And then my daughter is minimally verbal, intellectually disabled, like her uncle. She requires more community and medical supports. She's assertive, she's highly opinionated. Do not think that someone minimally verbal is not opinionated. Oh, Jesus Christ, help me. Oh, please pray for me, all of you. And she's shrewd. I remember chasing her when she was around 3 years old. And I'm trying to get her to talk more, because the speech therapist gave me some methods. She simply turned around. She walked away first. We're at the table. She walked away. I followed her. I was doing the most. Remember, I'm a perfectionist, so I'm a recovering type A personality. I should just let her. I followed her, and she turned around and went. And that's all I needed. That gives you just an example of what I'm dealing with at home. So pray for me. So the beauty of life is there are parts that are deja vu and parts that upon which you can learn from, and then parts that are brand new. So for me, like I mentioned, the IEP, the medical research, but the difference is we're now in a world that's a little bit more inclusive. Like these conferences didn't exist for my parents. They were completely by themselves. Lisa's story, if my mom heard that, the potential generational impact that could have made, things are better overall. If you look at the overall pace of the disability movement, there's still a lot of work to do. And that's what I now have stepped into, that as publicly joining this fray. I used to do this much more privately, but I stepped in publicly, because what are the chances that a sibling of an autistic man grows up and have not one but two? Sometimes God has to talk to you about some things, you know. One thing that I want to bring up that was really important in my journey as a young girl, sibling advocate, I came across this book. In 1994, I was in my teenage years. It's called Let Me Hear Your Voice by Catherine Maurice. And it was a woman with 2 babies on the spectrum. It's the first time I had heard of ABA therapy, and she used speech, and she did occupational therapy. And I thought to myself, wow, this lady's amazing. Like, what is she doing? I went home, I told both parents. Neither of them read the book. Full disclosure, I was resentful of them. But now that I'm a parent, there's a sense of overwhelm. They still had to support not only the family they had back in Nigeria. My dad was working full-time as a pharmacist, working overnight. My mom was an ICU nurse, full-time, raising 3 children, managing my brother's football and baseball and my basketball. I thought the book was for her, but if I'm being honest with myself, I realized the book was for me. Because when these diagnoses happened, I didn't have to start at 0. Another thing I witnessed as a young girl is watching my parents struggle with community. Balancing this veneer of we've made it, the American dream, and having Kunle, who at the time society just didn't know what to do with. When it now became my turn and I became a parent, I looked at the importance of community unapologetically. I look at practitioners, I look at family members as hope multipliers, the importance of hope multipliers. I look at friends the same. Hope multipliers, hope brokers, hope traffickers even. We can traffic in many things, but hope is good. Because I realized that if I didn't have strong community around us, we couldn't thrive, we couldn't be successful. Anybody who didn't fully understand, I won't say fully, anybody who wasn't willing to understand, we unapologetically self-selected whenever we could. We jokingly have the Alero test, because my daughter, like I said, requires many more community and medical supports. You say you want to be friends, no problem. We bring the whole clan comes over. And if you look at her like she's less than, or you look at her and you don't ask questions like, oh, what do we do? And if it's clear that you don't want to engage, no problem. We move on. Hope detractors need not apply. So for the podcast, I made sure that I interviewed my babies. And I interviewed a fella. I wanted him to introduce himself. He's very much a part of the podcast. He will tell you that he's an occasional producer. And he's head of marketing. And he's now 11. But at the time he introduced himself via our podcast, he was 9 years old. So with that in mind, here's Fela. Introducing our son, Fela.
Hi, I'm Fela. I am 9 years old. I'm on the spectrum, but I'm on the higher functioning side of it.
Describe what autism means to you.
For me, autism is basically where your brain works differently than others.
An excellent definition. Can you describe some of the challenges you face as someone who lives with autism?
Some of the challenges that I face are that I'm not exactly the best at social skills. Most of the time, when I have a small problem, I have a big reaction.
And how do you work through those challenges?
When I get mad, I usually breathe deep. It really helps. Actually really helps.
Fine. One day at a time, baby boy, one day at a time.
I now have a little excerpt from the diva of the house. And I promise you, she does not get it from me. It skipped a generation. It came from my mom and my mom-in-law, full disclosure. Alero.
Please welcome our daughter, Alero. She will be communicating both verbally and through her iPad, her communication device. Say hi, Alero.
Hi.
How are you? What's your name?
4.
How old are you?
I'm 7 years old.
Bye.
Bye.
Alero is resilience personified. She continues to add to her vocabulary and is showing improvement in both her expressive and receptive communication.
Okay. So, lane fully recognized, acknowledged formally. I got a lot going on, right? So, knowing that, how do I now move about the world? How does my family now move about the world successfully? How do we measure success in a way that works for us? By redefining it. I'm back with the definitions again. Apologies. You've all been warned. One definition of success is the attainment of wealth, position, honors, or the like. So let's expand upon that. So what does society view as success, right? So what are common societal views? Certain income bracket, certain education, certain neurotype, certain ability level. Our family's makeup doesn't exactly match up to all of those things. And my daughter's birth story really brings that home. So we jokingly call our daughter the child that my brother never had. When I say that they're similar, it's an understatement. So she has similar mannerisms to him. They even look alike. She's the baby of our home and our princess, but the way she came through the world is very, very dramatic. It had me questioning myself, what life really means. I was still dealing with perfectionism, that actions equal desired outcomes. I deceived myself in believing that. So I did everything right. Went to a certain hospital, started having extreme pain that felt more than just like contractions. I wasn't listened to on time, to make a long story short. My daughter was born not breathing. She swallowed meconium coming out. We think that that's what contributed to her intellectual disability and some of her breathing difficulties. I lost double the amount of blood one is supposed to lose in a C-section. I didn't deal with that trauma for years. I had the same recurring dream where I would dream that I got to the hospital and I changed the events. So the nurse listened to me on time and she came out breathing. I did that for years. And then one day, I told this story to my aunt. My aunt had a similar birth story. Her son was born with a traumatic brain injury. So I thought, if anyone would understand, it'll be her. So I talked to her, I vented, I cried, and she let me do all of those things. And then she gave me some advice that really gave me pause. She looked at me, she acknowledged my trauma, she acknowledged my hurt, as only a woman who could understand could. And she said, I understand, but now it's time to act like you went to the store and you bought it. Act like you went to the store and you bought it. Oprah calls these aha moments. That was an aha moment for me. It changed my mindset. How can I now redefine what success looks like under these circumstances? And do it well, and try and do it with as much grace as possible. But again, going back to that earlier slide, the power of community. She was a hope multiplier. She was not a hope detractor. Tools that our family used to redefine success. We knew that our children may not meet certain developmental milestones at the conventional time. So we had to revisit what is success for us. So with the help of some radical introspection, not delusion, not toxic positivity, and I know some people in this room know what toxic positivity is. My life is great all the time. No. Radical introspection. How do we redefine success in a meaningful way? So I jokingly call our family Olley Inc. We have a mission statement. We made the decision to pursue significance and fulfillment over other people's views of what success looks like for us. A well-meaning friend called me one day and said, perhaps Alero is like this because you don't pray enough. I responded, not by punching her through the phone, which was my initial. I responded because I happened to be a woman of faith. I said, perhaps this is my ministry. Have you ever thought of that? Have you ever thought that I have already been equipped to handle this instead of assuming that it's something I may have done wrong, so that other families can see me and think, this is not a death sentence for anybody in this woman's family. Everyone's living their best life. Silence. I started hearing crickets. I think I changed her mind that day. Our family's ultimate goal isn't to be for the masses. It is to be significant in the rooms we happen to be in. It's within this context that I started to really reimagine what it means to thrive. Back to definition land. It's the last time, I promise. The societal definition of thrive is to prosper, to flourish. But how can thriving be reimagined by my family? The answer for us lies in something a mentor told me, another hope multiplier. She simply asked, who were you before you ever became a parent? Who were you before you were a lifetime caregiver? Talk about a loaded question for somebody like me. So much of my identity is advocating for my family members. But what else am I? What else? What other category am I? Like what? I was like, I hadn't given it as much thought as I should have at that time. But it dawned on me that the key to thriving would be the ability to prosper and flourish, #definition, to prosper and flourish by connecting to the various parts of me on a regular basis so that no one part of me feels lost or discouraged. And then COVID-19 hit. So it would be that global pandemic that really forced this thought process into overdrive. So pre-pandemic, we were really proud of ourselves. Our husband, we moved from Wisconsin to Texas, and anyone who crosses state lines knows you have to rebuild your village all over again. It took us 3 to 4 years to get my daughter the health care she enjoyed in the previous state. Obviously, no one saw this global pandemic coming, but our medical village was strong, our healthcare coverage was strong, like everything. We had great caretakers, and then like a magic trick, it all went away. We had speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, ABA therapists, neurologists, developmental pediatricians, access to an adaptive parks and rec program. In the city we chose to live in, inclusive public library system that had sensory kits for Alero, great special education, and access to a community of friends who got us. All gone. For several weeks, we were left to fend for ourselves. I would even say going into months, eventually we would have mass therapists come into our home because we had to remember my daughter has breathing difficulties. It got to the point where she regressed so far that we made the decision to risk our health versus getting her the health care she needed. Before the pandemic, we knew we were vulnerable, but COVID-19 multiplied that. We were juggling multiple roles at the same time. I'm sure you all can relate. In one afternoon, I was a speech therapist, occupational therapist, behavioral therapist, attorney. I would get on Zoom, they're like, how's your day? Am I still employed? Good. I thrived in the previous version of my life through compartmentalization, but COVID-19 killed it. Control, I was reminded once again, was an illusion. But it gave me a strange gift at the same time. Without many of life's distractions, I was forced to deal with past trauma that I spoke of earlier. Sometimes when you deal with trauma, you just keep going. Go, 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 go. In the midst of the pandemic, it was right after my then 9-year-old fella said, our house is part clinic, part workplace, and part school. And I sat down and thought about all these deja vu moments. And I started thinking about what we would want our life to be now that we were faced with our own mortality. What does that look like? This was in the midst of George Floyd. This was in the midst of some articles that we started reading about how disabled people were treated who caught COVID-19 in the height of the pandemic, how ventilators were not given to them because doctors were deciding that they already had a, quote, low quality of life anyway. That particular article I read made me hug my daughter a little bit tighter that night, but it also made me realize what impact can we make in spite of everything we're experiencing. It threw us right back into radical introspection again, because bringing your whole self yet again is a process. It's a continual process. I was tired, I was stressed, I was angry, I was scared. So I started to think about what I could do that was cathartic, and legacy was on my mind as well. And I started to hear from parents locally whose child would get fresh diagnoses, but they didn't have a community to even start building because we were in the midst of the pandemic. So as my husband and I would advise these families privately, I started thinking about the importance of my family's journey spanning over 30 years and how it could potentially help others so that they could see that they're not alone, and it could provide an audio memoir for my children when they're adults so they can see the considerations that mom and dad made to make them become, to hopefully have them become the best versions of themselves. Legacy was definitely on my mind So I launched this podcast, Not Your Mama's Autism. In the very first episode, I interview my parents and Wale about the early days of the autism diagnosis. I heard my dad tell me for the first time that he was so overwhelmed by those initial days, and they felt so alone that he would go to the quiet parts of our house and cry. Something I never knew. It is not melodramatic to say that interviewing my parents now, and also there's another episode where I got to interview police in my community on neurodivergent policing practices and the registration program, being able to register your children that elope who are autistic. And I saw the connections between my life 20 years ago and what the police were now doing. And it started a journey of healing for me. I better understood the origin of my family's story based on one life-changing family event. I had spent so much time just going. I got to heal while I reconnected with the creative side of me that I had abandoned for years because I shouldn't have developed it at that time. I had to focus on X, Y, Z. So I found out more of me. And for those of you that feel disconnected, I ask, so who are you? Who were you before you ever became what you currently do for a living? Who were you before you ever became whatever society knows you most for? And do you consistently connect to those other parts of you? And have you made time, even if it's just 4 or 5 minutes a day in the morning, for some self-reflection? It's quite serendipitous that I'm giving this speech during Mental Health Awareness Month. With practice, I learned to reconnect. Before I was ever a caregiver, whether it be a parent caregiver or a sibling one, I was a creative. I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer. I'm a speaker. The 2 boxes in yellow were the parts I just abandoned. You know, I gotta do this thing. Kunle's coming. I gotta focus on making money, setting up this nest egg for him, and then later on my children. I did not see the value in reconnecting, but it provided my life greater meaning. Again, it's not easy, but it's far more greater meaning, and something else strange happened. My capacity grew. And I don't mean that I suddenly have 36 hours in the day and everybody else has 24. I mean that I increase my capacity to give myself grace. I joke and say I'm recovering type A personality, but I stand before you today as a proud type B+. And again, I know this looks different for everybody, as it should. Everybody's circumstances in life are slightly different, but please make time to reconnect. And it doesn't have to be every day, weekly, monthly, but check in with yourself. Because when you're on this journey, you can go to bed at age 35 and wake up and be 65, like, what have I been doing for 30 years? Autopilot is always there if you're not careful. So we made the decision as a family. We're on the road to more consistent personal development. My husband and I had to first recognize our lane unapologetically. We are not like some other families, and that's okay. We can still be successful in our own lane by redefining it. We chose and continue to choose to pursue healing over the trappings of traditional success. We are currently thriving by reconnecting to multiple parts of who we are. And we're raising budding self-advocates, and it's showing itself in different forms. One is minimally verbal, one has quite a many words, but we're making it work for us. I'm bolder now than I once was, and some people call me courageous because I am so vulnerable in my advocacy journey. When someone calls me that, I remember this saying: courage is fear that has said its prayers. And I thank you all for being here. And I continue to take life one day at a time, and I implore you all to do the same. We got this. Thank you.
We're a little bit over time, but we also have a break built in. So we have time for 2 questions. Does anybody have a question for Lola?
What on earth made you move to Texas?
I have one sentence to answer. I did it for love. So my husband got a job offer to move to Texas. I joke and say that's part of the reason why our advocacy game is strong. Because there are some things that, unfortunately, with Texas, with just all states, there's no uniformity. So we left Wisconsin that had amazing care, and we moved to Texas, and it took my daughter in particular. My son had already gotten almost 2 years of therapy, so you could already see where he was going. But my daughter was 2, and we moved with her to Texas. And she regressed because she didn't get the full-time services she got in Wisconsin for about 6 to 9 months after we moved, and we didn't get the level of care until about 3 years into our journey. So we moved for a better economic opportunity, and we were promised same level of health care, and we did not receive it upon our landing. And that is a podcast episode. Anybody else have questions?
Any other questions? Oh, I see one back here.
Good morning, Lola.
Good morning.
I'm Diane Thacker. I watched your, it was a little bit of a video, and what caught my attention was when you were able to look back and connect the dots. That gave me goosebumps. So my question is, because I wear many hats as well, were you able to see that, stepping back going, aha, aha, and it just kind of, you're nodding, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Can you speak about that a little bit, because that was just really moving.
Sure. So my husband's not here, so I'm gonna say I'm stubborn, right? So, and don't tell him that I openly admitted I'm stubborn. But sometimes it takes people outside to tell you about yourself, people you trust. So in my TED Talk, I mentioned helping me connect the dots where I'm still just going. By that time, I had now got my 2nd autism diagnosis, and a girlfriend called me, and everybody else was saying, I'm so sorry, which makes me angry, right? She said, well, you do have a brother, now you have 2 babies. Perhaps you know what your purpose is. And that forced me into what I call radical introspection first. This is the pre-pandemic version, right? Of, okay, this is my purpose. This has happened 3 times within 2 generations. I could see, I have a unique perspective of seeing how far the movement has gone, but then I could identify the gaps because I have 30 years to look at it. How can I use that to help? So it took actually a friend, a trusted friend, to tell me about myself, if you will.
All right, thank you everybody for listening to Lola over the keynote. Let's give her one more round of applause.
Thank you.
Please do fill out your evaluation packet or evaluation paper. Pull it off of the staple and fill it out and just leave it upside down on your table. We will collect them. Lola is going to be around for the afternoon or for the morning. She's got a breakout session, and then she's going to be around a little bit before she has to catch her flight. So if you didn't get a chance to ask your question right now, come find her. I promise she'll be interested in talking with you. The family advocacy session that is typically family track is down in room A. That family session is up here blended with the self-advocacy session just for this first breakout session. Family advocates and self-advocates are going to be together in this room. That's on your agenda as well, but I just wanted to be sure and remind you of that. And don't forget about those birds of a feather sessions over lunchtime. Thanks, everybody. Go take a break, visit the exhibitors, and we'll see you back in a few minutes.